Hello and welcome to Curless Mania, where we talk rock, pop, and prog. Today, we are here to talk about the last album by The Clash called Combat Rock, released in 1982. I did a video on Sandinista you can check out. It's on this channel. Check it out. And I just figured I'd continue the momentum with The Clash and keep going with Combat Rock. Now, this album has quite a history to it, and I really think it's appropriate to share a little bit of background on it before we dive into the tracks and the record itself, because it took a long time to get to this, in a roundabout way, in many different alleyways, and so you'll see in a minute, before we got to the single record that was Combat Rock in 1982. So, a little bit of history. Sandinista, released in 1980. Triple record. Coming out just insane triple record with anything they could throw at it. It had pop, it had rock, it had ska, it had reggae, it had dub, it had, gospel, everything, any kind of music you can think of is almost on this record. It's insane. There's spoken word on it. It's just, there's instrumentals on it. There's scatting on it. It's just all over the place. And like I said in my last video, it's pretty fascinating. However, in the UK, when this came out, a lot of critics were not happy with it. They thought that The Clash had really sold out to the United States. They had become Americanized, because the Clash was very, when they first came out, they were UK punk, right? So they were England's band, and suddenly they were catering to the United States in a lot of eyes of the critics. In particular, Nick Kent, the NME, when this came out, gave it a pretty scathing review, basically saying it was completely indulgent and really way beyond their scope, and they had no business doing a lot of this stuff, and they needed a producer. And it was pretty scathing, but I think a lot of it hit Joe Strummer pretty hard. He read those reviews, and he was already having some misgivings about putting out a triple record anyway. And Mick Jones, I think, essentially talked him into doing it, and just said, all this stuff is brilliant. We're a great band. We can do this. We just released London Calling, which was a huge hit. We can do whatever we want. Let's do it. So he got talked into it, like, okay, great, you're right. Maybe stuff is brilliant. Let's do it. Let's go for it. Let's be outrageous. That's awesome. And then when the scathing reviews came out, I think it was sort of a reminder to him, like, maybe I was right about this record. Maybe it was too indulgent. Maybe we pushed it too far and we're alienating people now. So, I'm skipping ahead here. I'm skipping ahead of myself, but, essentially I have some notes, so I'm going to refer to some of them here. Sandinista was big in America. Magnificent Seven, I remember hearing on the radio and thinking it was a cool track. Not sure if there were any other hits on here. Somebody Got Murdered, I think, was on the radio. But I particularly remember Magnificent Seven getting a good amount of airplay in the U.S. and people loving that. So this album had a huge American influence, as I said. They smoked a huge amount of pot recording this album, let's just be honest. I mean, they had Mikey Dread with them the whole time, who I'm sure was plying them generously with it. And it kind of comes through a little bit in this record that, there was a lot of that going on. It was truly a Mick Jones production. Mick was in charge. He was calling the shots. He was writing the music. He was mixing the album. He was behind the board. It was really his baby. I mean, of course, Joe wrote all the lyrics and Joe helped with the songs, but it was mostly Mick who was kind of running the ship at this point. It's extremely adventurous 3-record set, as I already said. And at this point, it's worth saying that they were being managed by Black Hill Management, which was Peter Jenner. He had been Syd Barrett's and the original Pink Floyd's manager back in '67. And then they bailed on Pink Floyd when Syd left. They just thought they didn't have a future without Syd. Well, maybe they should have stayed with him. But anyway, so at this point, they are managing The Clash, and they're trying to help The Clash to become a money-making exercise, right? So they are working hard to try to, with all these punk ideals, they're doing 2 albums for the price of 1, 3 albums for the price of 2. And CBS is like, sure, you can do that, but you're going to make less money. And they're like, okay, that's cool. We don't care. Blah, blah, blah. But manager Black Hill was like, dude, you guys got to stop doing this. You guys got to start making money. They're trying to get them to abandon their punk ideals, is what I have on here, and make some money. They were growing deeper and deeper in debt to CBS. And Peter Jenner was trying to tell these guys, like, you got to stop with these. I mean, I understand, I get what you're trying to go for here, but you need to dial it back and start making some money. So Joe felt like, these guys are just like, they're like the principal, man. They're like my boss. Like, they're telling me to do all these things I don't want to do. I don't like them. They were much more of the album tour, stayed album tour to album tour kind of thing. And let's just try to make money. And Joe was like, what is up with this? I mean, I'm kind of done with these guys. And he met with Bernie Rhodes and at some point for lunch or something, and then said, hey, come to the next band meeting. So it was interesting that he invited Bernie to the next band meeting. And I'm sure Mick was not happy about that at all. And Joe basically wanted Bernie back because he wanted, I think there was a couple reasons for this. I think it was one, that he was feeling like Mick was taking over a little bit too much, and he was losing a little bit of control of the band. And he wanted that kind of chaotic father figure, punk idealist who helped them kind of see their vision at the beginning. He kind of wanted that back. And I think he felt it was slipping away. So the upshot is that Black Hill gets fired before this album gets released. So before this album even hits the shops, Black Hill is out and Bernie Rhodes is back in. So there is now a growing divide between Joe and Mick. I'm going to put this down now over here because we're talking about combat rock today, not this. So there's a growing divide between Joe and Mick now. And that's really, this is the beginning of kind of the end of the clash, because Joe essentially puts his foot down and says, okay, I'm not going to continue unless Bernie is the manager again, which had never happened before. This was sort of like a new thing, like, whoa, he's putting his foot down and saying he's going to leave if this doesn't happen. It's like, whoa, okay, this is new. So that wasn't good. And so Mick is like, wow, okay, he's throwing ultimatums down here. This is getting a little weird. And so anyway, he felt things were getting too corporate and too staid. He wanted the punk rock energy back. It was feeling more like a standard rock band. 1980, by the way, is a new decade. That's another thing I was thinking about, was that I have a note here. A new decade turns, and the Clash have been working nonstop for 5 years with not much money to show for it. And also, I think when you notice how when decades turn, things tend to, in the 80s particularly for some reason in music, seemed to be kind of a cataclysmic time, that a lot of bands that had been around for a while changed their style immensely because the 80s were sort of a new time. And I think people start to assess when it turns. 79, the 70s, everything's cool, and all of a sudden 1980 hits, and it's like, okay, maybe it's time to reassess. I think a lot of people do. It's just a natural thing. And so I think that was also kind of playing into this a little bit. And I think that Joe and Mick, the Clash, they had been working non-stop since they started in 76. They just been working they'd not stopped. And like I said, I don't think he was looking around going, we don't really have much money here. And I think when Bernie Rhodes came in, he noticed the same thing. He's like, geez, there's no money being made here. I also said on here, I said this decision with Joe putting his foot down for Bernie, this decision is to have disastrous consequences, which is very true. I mean, this is really the first step to the Clash breaking up. It took a while, but it was the first brick in the wall, if you will. So Mick is not excited about this new development, but he goes along with it. So he's like, all right, fine, Bernie's back. I'll deal with it. I want to keep the Clash together. We're still making good music. Bernie and Mick started the band together, but their relationship was often contentious. Mick often challenged Bernie, and Bernie didn't like it. So there was just like this constant sort of like this going on between the two of them. I think it was like, he helped start the band, but Mick was like, hey man, when, he would challenge him a lot. Bernie wanted to get back to the punk rock roots. Okay, we already talked about that. So Joe starts to change his attitude once Bernie is back and begins to side with Bernie on issues. Because Bernie says things like, when he comes in, he starts listening to the song, says they're already recording the next record. They're already in New York making another record, which is to become Combat Rock. And he says, why does everything have to be a raga? And that ends up being in... a raga meaning like every song is going on for 10 minutes. This is ridiculous. Why does every song have to go on for so long? Like, where's the 2-3 minute songs? They're gone. Because by this point, they were just jamming in the studio and putting out, just like having these long mixes and just letting things go for a long time. And that's a lyric that ends up in Rock the Casbah. The whole, the king told the boogeyman, you got to let that raga drop. That's exactly from Bernie. So the album that becomes Combat Rock begins life as Rat Patrol from Fort Bragg. That's the original title for it. I believe they were looking to do another double record at this point. Again, Mick is at the helm again, just like Sandinista. They're recording in New York again, same thing. I think that Joe had an idea of like, let's just do this really cheaply and fast in England. And Mick was like, no, we're going to New York again. So it was interesting. There seemed to be a lot of ultimatums dropping here and there and everywhere. Like, oh no, we're not doing this, we're doing that. It was just definitely a beginning of push-pull between Joe and Mick a lot. So tons of songs being recorded at this point. Tons of styles, again, being thrown in all over the place. However, noticeably not as much reggae this time. But again, it's looking like Sandinista Part 2. It's what it's kind of looking like as it starts out. There's a bunch of outtakes that you can check out on YouTube or on Sound System or on Black Market Clash that I forgot to grab. In fact, I probably should grab that right now. Hold on a second. Okay, so the first time that I heard outtakes from Combat Rock was when I purchased the extended version of Black Market Clash, which I listened to quite a bit back in the day. And it's long, it's 21 tracks. And when I first bought this, I thought, wow, this is a lot of outtakes. This is great. I mean, this is basically outtakes from the whole career. And the last quarter of it has a bunch of songs that they recorded for the Combat Rock sessions. I believe Radio Clash was part of that, which I love. And I really wish that Radio Clash was part of the album. That would have been great. Because I love that track. First Night Back in London is a slow song about Topper's bust when he got back to England from a tour. I have Slow Groove, Stop Start, and a foreboding vocal from Joe. Interesting track, but, it's okay. Long Time Jerk is a bit of a rockabilly rhythm, sort of like a horse gallop, with sound effects thrown in there for good measure. But it's pretty insubstantial. It's not a huge song. I mean, it's kind of repetitive and kind of does the same thing over and over and over. Cool Confusion is basic reggae. They didn't do that much reggae. They didn't put that much reggae on the final record. But this one is a reggae groove. Not much of a song, really, I have written here. It's kind of a strange lyric, too. I'm not really sure what it's about. Kind of an odd lyric. So I guess what I'm getting at is, here's 3 songs right here that I can understand where they were left off. So that brings me to the next point, which is, as we said already, Joe was ready to make money. And ironically enough, so was Bernie. Bernie, it's ironic because we brought him back for the punk ideals and he's like, let's go, let's make some money. I think he thought, well, this is my second chance. Now this time I'm going to cash out and make some money on these guys. As this record's being recorded, Joe feels that it's more of the same. He feels like we're making Sandinista Part 2 and he's not happy about it. He wants a change. So Bernie does make a great suggestion. He says, how about bringing in Glyn Johns to produce this record? And because he felt that they needed an outside producer. And actually, this is sort of a stroke of genius. This was a great suggestion because Glyn Johns was known as sort of a producer who would come in on a troubled project and make it happen. For example, Who's Next? This is the big example where that was originally a concept record called Lighthouse, double album. Pete was having problems. The band was having problems. Kit Lambert was falling apart. And Glyn Johns came in and said, look, I don't know what this concept's about, but these are great songs. Just make a record with these great songs and you'll be fine. And that's exactly what happened. They went in and recorded the tracks, and it was a great record. So he also helped with the band Stage Fright. He mixed a bunch of songs. Todd Rundgren had been working on that, and Glyn Johns came in late in the project and mixed a bunch of songs for them. He also worked with the Rolling Stones forever. I mean, he was the engineer for the Rolling Stones during their golden period, essentially. So Glyn Johns comes in and he starts getting very ruthless and listening to everything and saying, well, that's not good enough. That's good. Cut that down to 3 minutes. That one's off. No, cut that one. Drop this one. He's just ruthless. He's coming in and he's remixing everything. And of course, Mick is completely boycotting the sessions. I mean, I think he came in at the end, but he was not happy about it. And he said to Joe, you're ruining my art. I mean, this is Mick. It's really the art versus the commerce at this point, because Mick is the artist who just thinks everything, this is art and you're screwing with it. And Joe is thinking we need a commercial product for the marketplace. So to the actual record itself. I really think this came out as a great record. I'm going to say that right now. I really think it's a strong album. It's a very unique album, and it's very strange for a major commercial release. This is a very strange record. It does have some hits on it, but it also has some odd, strange things on it that I think are great. I mean, so I just have some notes here. I mean, Know Your Rights, all three of them. This is a public service announcement with guitars. Love that. That was apparently remixed quite a bit by Glyn Johns. He upped the drums quite a bit and upped the guitars, so it became more of a rock song, which I think is great. It sounds fantastic. I'm not going to talk about every track. Should I Say or Should I Go? Obviously the big hit on here. One of the big hits, I should say. And another irony, because this is Mick's song, and it's the most basic song he had written in forever. Really basic, like almost like a 50s song. If you listen to it, it's like 4 chords. And it ended up being a big hit. And he was the one who was supposed to be ruining the commercial prospects. And then, of course, Rock the Casbah, which is Topper's song. I mean, Topper had a song that he had written years previous. It was like a piano song. He came in early for one of the sessions and just started noodling around because nobody was there yet. So he's like, hey, I got this idea, start rolling tape. And he did the piano, the drums, and the bass. And it was just one little, I don't know, it was like a minute 50 or something. And they said, well, Joe came in and loved it and said, this is fantastic. Let's just loop this. I've got an idea. He went and wrote lyrics, and it became Rock the Casbah, their biggest hit. And it's just another irony is that this was Topper's last record with them. So Topper wrote the biggest hit on this record. And then as soon as it was released, he was let go from the band. So it's just so crazy. Red Angel Dragnet is interesting. It's apparently about the shooting of a guardian angel, Frank Melvin. The Guardian Angels were like a vigilante group, I believe. He was shot by police in Newark, New Jersey in 1981, and that's what this song is about. It's interesting because Cosmo Vinyl is doing the voice of Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver at the end. It's great. I love that part. And I don't know if I already said this already, but I don't think I did. This album is very influenced by Vietnam and Vietnam movies and books. Apocalypse Now, Joe had watched like 3 or 4 times, loved it. And so the whole band did. Taxi Driver was another one, Deer Hunter. And then there was a book called Dispatches that was being handed around the Clash camp around that time, which was about from a Vietnam vet. So they were very Vietnam War minded during a lot of this sessions. And a lot of the songs are informed by that. Straight to Hell is another one of, speaking of being influenced, it's about children of American soldiers in Vietnam. So kids fathered by American soldiers while they were there in Vietnam. And it's just a very touching song, and I love the vibe of it. It's just a great vibe. Excellent song. Sean Flynn is another song that he was the son of actor Errol Flynn. He was a photojournalist. He was an actor for a little while, then he became a photojournalist, and he was in Cambodia in 1970, and he got abducted somehow and never was seen again. And it's just, this is a very unique song. This is what I was talking about earlier about being unique. Very tribal drumming. Mick has got a big effect, echo effect on his guitar. And then there's a bunch of sound effects happening as well, but it's very freeform song, and extremely unique for the Clash, even for the Clash. Ghetto Defendant has spoken word poetry in it with Allen Ginsberg during the verses, and then Joe sings the choruses. So it's, again, another very unique song. And he says, "Do the worm on Metropolis." It's like, okay. And then Death is a Star closes out the record, and in a very mellow fashion. And it says, apparently it's about how we line up and get in line and pay to watch movies where people get shot and killed. So in other words, death is being the star. So really, again, a unique lyric for the Clash, and every time I hear that song, I kind of think of like a dark bar or something where everyone's kind of sitting around and listening to someone play the piano, and it evokes a very interesting mood. So that's Combat Rock for you. I think it's a great record. It had a troubled birth, but sometimes out of troubled birth comes great art. So we're very thankful for that. And that's it. That's it. I mean, there's your history, there's your backstory, and there's a little bit of commentary about the record. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something about the Clash today. Wearing my Bonds shirt, as I said earlier. And this is it. This is Curless Mania. That was Combat Rock. And the next, what I'm planning to do with this channel is do a rock album, a pop album, and a prog album. And then rock, pop, prog. So I'm not sure what the next album is going to be. It might be Skylarking by XTC, another album that had a difficult birth. So I might stay with the difficult birth theme. I think that's what we're going to do for the next couple of videos. But please, if you liked this video, please like it, hit the like button, and please subscribe. If you really like it, subscribe. Even if you didn't like it, subscribe. So anyway, this is Curless Mania. Thank you very much again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.